perspective presented by the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association, following our few principles of humanism.
We're committed to the use of science and reason for understanding the universe and for solving human problems. We're skeptical of untested claims of knowledge, but we're open to new ideas.
We are concerned with securing justice and fairness in society and in ending intolerance and discrimination. We are committed to the total separation of religion and government.
We affirm humanism as a realistic alternative to the theologies of despair and the ideologies of violence. We reject the concept of an afterlife and believe in living a full and rewarding life here and now.
We value and respect each individual's right to judge and lead their lives according to their own position, as long as it's respectful of other people, living in a free society.
We hope you enjoy today's program and others in the weeks to follow. Hello, folks. Thanks for being with us. I'm Harry Greenberger, and I am the host of this show. And my guest today is a man whom I have known for a number of years. And I'd like to tell you about Jeff Crouere, who is the host of a Louisiana-based program called Ringside Politics, which airs at 7:30 p.m. on Friday and 10 p.m. on Sunday on WLAE TV. And from 7 to 11 a.m. on weekdays, he has a show on WGSO AM in New Orleans and the North Shore. And in addition to that, once a month, Jeff has a live show, a live program at the Eiffel Tower location. Well, we've known each other a long time, Jeff, and we've sparred with each other over issues. And this is my opinion or my observation about your persona. Philosophically, I think that you are a very conservative, as well as your audiences. Now, I don't know whether that is a role that you play, or whether you are a true conservative appealing to a very conservative audience. Which is the case there?
Well, that's a good question. And Harry, thank you for having me. And it's great to be on your program, and I've always enjoyed having you on my program. And it's always a good discussion. But yeah, I am a person that grew up following politics. My dad was politically inclined. We watched the news together. I grew up, my sister worked in Washington, and she would send me autographed pictures of politicians, so I collected that. I collected political buttons. From my earliest time, we went up to Washington when I was 11, and I just really became very interested in politics. And as I learned about the political figures, the one person that I really admired the most was Ronald Reagan, because he was running in 1976 when I was 13. And I sort of became a strong Reagan conservative. And ever since then, I got involved volunteering with the Republican Party. I wound up being executive director of the Louisiana Republican Party. And then in 1999, got an offer to start my radio show. And that led to the TV show and then the Politics with a Punch, which you talked about. So I'm a true conservative. I think that the Republican Party today has a real battle going on between the establishment wing and the conservative wing, and we don't know how that's going to turn out. But my view,
not well, I suspect.
My view, Harry, is that when the Republicans nominate a conservative, they give voters a real choice. When they nominate someone who's more middle of the road, more what I call a rhino, they don't really give the voters that choice, because there's a lot of agreement between your people in the middle of the Republican Party and the Democrats, and a lot of people just gravitate toward the Democrats. So we'll see what happens. I think it's going to be a fascinating presidential race, and I've been covering it closely.
Well, earlier in my life, I was a registered Republican. I didn't leave the Republican Party. The Republican Party left me. I am a fiscal conservative, but I am a social liberal. And so I'm now.
And I talk to a lot of people that are in that.
I'm registered as an independent.
And
so in Louisiana, I get to vote on a lot of things.
A lot of the people that are in that realm tell me they're libertarians or, non-party affiliated people like you. So,
well, I am a libertarian with a lowercase L. I'm not a member of that party.
Right.
Although I have a great deal of sympathy for them, they just aren't going to elect very many people. Well, when we first talked about your being on the show and you suggested a number of topics we might talk about, all of them very interesting. But I'm going to start out with one that you did not suggest. I want to talk about the Constitution of the United States. The Constitution of the United States. This country was set up as not as a democracy, but as a republic, with three branches: the legislative, executive, and judicial. And it spelled out what each one could do and how you elected people. How do you like our constitutional government, or would you like to change it?
I like, and I'm glad you said it the way you did, because a lot of people say we're a democracy, and we're not a democracy.
We were not set up to do
we're
one.
We're not mob rule. Remember when Benjamin Franklin was asked, well, what have we created here? He said, well, a constitutional republic, if we can keep it. And that, I think, is something that we've been enjoying the benefits of all these years. I think that's why we're still here. I think it was a document that has served us very, very well. What I worry about, Harry, is when we have people like Barack Obama and other presidents who try to assume more power in the executive branch through executive orders, through accumulation of more power, and I think that infringes on the other branches of government. So
Are you saying that it is not allowed under the Constitution, that they've gone beyond what they're allowed to do, or not?
I'm saying that a lot of these executive orders, I think, and that's what the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals found in the recent decision about the executive order about amnesty, was that he did violate the law. I mean, it was not constitutional. So his executive amnesty plans are on hold right now as this thing now goes through the courts. So I'm glad we had a court of appeals that was able to stop that. So I definitely do like our system the way it is. I'll cite Jonathan Turley, the constitutional scholar, who said the problem that we have is an executive branch running amok, and we have a Congress, the legislative branch, that is inert. They are not fulfilling their responsibilities.
But they have the right to.
They have the right to. Right. They've chosen not to.
I want to ask you about the judicial. Are you satisfied that final decisions by the United States Supreme Court are the law of the land?
Well, I mean, that's unfortunately the system that we have in some cases where I think the Supreme Court has made a bad decision. And I wonder, Harry, if we need to look at different ways of nominating and confirming Supreme Court justices. For example, we've got some people on the Supreme Court now that have been there for literally decades. I'm wondering, would it be a better way to have sort of just like we have for other judges, they serve until a certain age.
Limits, yeah.
Or terms, and I'm just, to me, it does sort of concern me that we have some justices that have been there literally for decades. However, the way it's set up now, yes, that is the final arbiter.
All right. Well, when I have talked with people about their recent decision that has disturbed a lot of people having to do with same-sex marriage, and they, by 5-4, said that was constitutional. But what I have told people, do you realize that of the 9 judges on the Supreme Court, 6 are Catholics and 3 are Jews? There's not even a Protestant on that court. And yet, for a 5-4 decision, at least one Catholic had to vote in favor of same-sex marriage. People not really not aware of that, but it's an unbalanced Supreme Court being, with that kind of representation. All right.
And that was Justice Kennedy.
Yeah. Well, he was, but he is still on the generally conservative. Generally.
That's open for debate.
His was the swing vote here.
Right.
All right. So you're not totally happy with the setup with the Supreme Court, but you are prepared to accept it.
Right. And I think, obviously that's why we fight so hard in presidential elections, Harry, because the president nominates Supreme Court justices,
Absolutely.
Congress, Senate confirms, and we have, I think, a big election coming up where I bet the next president is going to have the ability to maybe nominate several Supreme Court justices.
I'll tell you what, if our next president is a Republican, that scares the life out of me because they've already got the majority. I think that the justices most likely to die or retire are the liberal ones. They're getting pretty old over there. Anyway, so you.
I don't know about that, Harry, because the liberals have won on Obamacare. They've won on gay marriage, so they've had some pretty big victories.
When you say they won, you mean they interpreted the Constitution
right.
to read that way.
They disappointed a lot of conservatives.
All right, now there. I want to talk about two amendments to the Bill of Rights.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2 has to do with the right to bear arms.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is what these are the words. It says here, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to bear and keep arms shall not be infringed. Now, if it had not said a well-regulated militia being necessary, if it just said the right to bear arms, then of course everyone has the right to bear arms. When they wrote this, I think all they had was muskets. You could shoot it once and then you had to stop and put gunpowder in it. They did not envision all of the weaponry we have today, which is being argued is absolutely legal under this Amendment 2. What is your feeling about bearing arms?
Recently, Harry, I just started learning how to operate a firearm. I've never really been one that had guns, and I've started training at a range and able to learn how to use a weapon. And I've gotten involved in a group called the Home Defense Foundation. And our belief is that there are too few police in New Orleans. There are too many criminals, and people need to take matters into their own hands as far as protecting their property and their loved ones. And we really got a lot of publicity after the whole Marshall Coulter case, where you had a gentleman, Merritt Landry, who was protecting his property, his pregnant wife, and he shot someone who had climbed the fence and was in his yard, and he was charged with a crime. And we got the law changed in the legislature to give more protections to homeowners. So I think that this is something very important in a city like New Orleans, where I think you see the crime situation is out of control. My view, Harry, is that the criminals, they don't care about what the laws are. They're going to get guns. Not. They're going to get guns wherever they're going to get guns.
There are more guns in this country than there are people.
Right, and remember,
it would do no good to, even if you stop the sale of all guns, there are enough out there. But then the question is, and what you were talking about, self-protection, you're talking about a handgun. What about all of these multiple firing weapons? Where do you draw the line? Can you have a machine gun? You know what guns are people allowed to own?
Well, some people believe that they want an AR-15 or they want a weapon like that to protect their home. Others like to use it for target practice. Others like to use that type of a weapon to go hunting. I think we shouldn't be putting too many limits. I think right now automatic guns, machine guns are not allowed. There are certain limits on what people can own. I don't think you're allowed to own too many of those. But I do think it's best for us not to put too many limits on the rights of homeowners, the rights of gun owners. And I guess my thought is this, that if we can have people out there that are trained, and I don't want people out there using guns that don't know how to use a gun. That's where innocent people could be killed.
Well, how do you, if half the people in the country already own guns, how do you train them all?
Well, that's what groups like the Home Defense Foundation are doing. We're offering free lessons on how people can go out and get trained to use a firearm. So, thus, when you have somebody breaking into your house, you can protect your family.
Okay. Now, the First Amendment has to do with freedom of a number of things, one of which is very important to me and my organization. That's the freedom of religion.
Right.
Which the Supreme Court has ruled is not just the freedom of religion, it's freedom from religion. And as Thomas Jefferson said, there's a wall of separation between them. And that is a matter of litigation continuously, endlessly. In the state of Louisiana, that is being violated every day with their prayers in public schools, and I don't know. How do you feel about that?
I love the First Amendment. I'm on talk radio. Our whole stock and trade is freedom of speech, and I worry that we're infringing on the free speech rights of Americans today. So I cherish the First Amendment, and I believe that it was something that we should all support vigorously.
Well, I don't think there's a whole lot of opposition to the freedom of speech. It's the freedom of religion.
We're talking about the fairness doctrine. I think that's could be an infringement on talk radio, on freedom of speech.
One of the topics that you just mentioned that we might talk about is the war on Christmas. What in the world is that?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of folks out there like to be able to say Merry Christmas. They like to be able to celebrate Christmas with Christmas trees. There's been a lot of, I think, pushback against that. In some outlets, people feel like they can't put up a Christmas tree. They can't say Merry Christmas. So I guess in years past, people felt like they were able to express their views about Christmas more freely than today. Look at Celebration in the Oaks. There used to be Christmas in the Oaks. That's one thing that has changed here locally.
Let me clarify something. And we'll get back to the fact that I don't think there's any war on Christmas. But aside from that, the people who are concerned with getting religion into public life are concerned with government bodies expressing religious positions. There's nobody is objecting to a store. If Macy's wants to say Merry Christmas, they can say Merry Christmas. Nobody is objecting to any private individual or organization doing anything they want about it. They can put a creche in front of their house, in front of their store, but it's a question of the government, and you have already understood that the First Amendment separates government from religion.
So you have a problem?
If City Hall in New Orleans, wants to put a Christ on their lawn, that is a violation of the Constitution, and they shouldn't do it. But I don't know that there's being a war waged over that.
Like a Christmas tree at the White House. You're opposed to that, Harry?
Well, I have mixed feelings. You brought out something, because I'll tell you what, in my organization of secular people, most of us have Christmas trees. Unfortunately for the religious people, Christmas is no longer a religious occasion. It's a commercial event. That's what it is. I mean, that's what's going on. It's just become commercial.
I completely agree. I mean, I think we've lost the reason for the season.
And so if the White House puts up a tree, they didn't have any figure of Mary and Jesus in front of it. And I could live with that. I wouldn't want them to.
So then it's okay to do it at City Hall and the state capitol?
Christmas tree.
Okay.
Not with a message on it, not with any kind of message. I mean, even if we say we wish you a Merry Christmas, which means we wish you a Merry Jesus Christ Day, right? That's what Christmas is. that's in violation of the Constitution.
All right, so then, Harry, should we start saying, all right, you federal employees, you state employees, you local employees, you got to work on Christmas because we can't be giving you off a holiday for a religious celebration,
Well,
right?
there is some movement that says if you give all the religious people a day off for a religion, then you should give the secular people a day a year, maybe for the summer solstice. You know, equality, treating people equal. That's
I don't think
all.
people want to give up their holiday, Harry.
Well, I'm
People
not
would be
suggesting-
fine if you want to give them another holiday because you know how government is.
No,
They
I'm
want as
just
many
saying,
holidays as they can
If you're going
get.
to give this religious group a holiday, give the. I mean, and not everyone in this country is Christian. You understand? What about all the Muslims?
80% approximately.
Well, but what about the millions of Muslims? It's not their
3 million,
It's
right.
not their religion.
Right.
So it's discriminatory. It is not treating everybody equally.
Well, I mean, so what should we do? I mean, should we? I don't think we want to ban Christmas holidays.
Oh no, I just
so-
think government should step back and private people and private companies can do whatever they want to. You know, there is no war on those people. And if Macy's wants to put Jesus in their window, even though I think the owners are Jews, they can do that. You know, so I don't see a war on Christmas.
So, okay, well, we agree on Christmas trees. I like nativity scenes too, Harry. I mean, I grew up.
Put one in your front yard. That's okay.
I grew up seeing those on public places, and I didn't have a problem with it.
Well, I hope I have given you a problem with it because it violates the separation of church and state.
Well, I think they have been litigated, and I think in some cases they've been allowed, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know every court case. I think it's a sort of a mixed record on that.
Well, I would hope they straighten the record out. I'm going to throw something at you that wasn't one of your suggestions.
You didn't follow any of my suggestions, did you?
How do you feel about Donald Trump?
Harry, I like Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump is cruising right now. He's 20 points ahead among the Republicans. He's 36. Ted Cruz is 16. And I think the reason why so many people like Donald Trump is that he's a strong leader. He says what's on his mind. He's not politically correct. And he also has his own money. So he doesn't have to dance to the tune of some big donor. He's not controlled by anybody. And the establishment hates him, which is one reason I like him, because I think the Republican establishment has been horrible to the Republican Party and created all kinds of problems. So he's a wild card. They're going crazy over him. They don't know what to do about him, and I love it.
Well, I'll tell you, everyone I know thinks I'm crazy because I like Donald Trump. For this reason, I mean, he really says things he really shouldn't even say, but he never goes back to apologize. However, if he is not the next president, whether the next one's Republican or a Democrat, we are still going to have this a government incapable of moving forward and agreeing on things and solving problems. It's whoever gets elected president, we're going to have status quo. The only one out there who can get this country back moving, as he said, make us great again, is Donald Trump. Now, he's scary. He really is. And people say, well, what about international relations? You know, but what do you think the chances are that he might get the nomination?
I think every day they're increasing, and I think it's been he announced in June, and I remember right after he announced, I wrote a column, and I said, boy, that was a pretty strong announcement, and I like what he said, and everybody was like, oh, he's a flash in the pan, he's going nowhere.
Yeah.
6 months later, he's still leading, so they've tried everything they could to topple him, and it hasn't worked. So I think there's a chance he could be the nominee, and I think if he's a nominee, I think he'll win.
And the other guy who's in there, you know, with probably second in the polls, he's nuts. That man is nuts.
Ben Carson?
Yes, he really is. He's nuts. He says the pyramids were built to store food, not as a tomb.
I think he's a good man. I don't think he's presidential material.
I think he's insane. All right. Well, listen, we're going to have a few minutes left. Is there something you would like to talk about?
Well, I mean, I guess we had visited on my TV show about the whole case involving Kim Davis.
Absolutely.
And that was, of course, the Kentucky clerk who is a Democrat, by the way, Harry.
She was. She converted to the Republican Party.
Okay, well, she was a Democrat.
She was a Democrat.
Right. Mm-hmm.
No, and she knew what she was doing when she said God talked to her and told her that if she signed one of those marriage certificates, she would spend eternity in hell. She didn't believe that, and I don't believe she believed that. She ran for this office, clerk of court, knowing this situation would come up, and she said, aha, I can make myself a celebrity. And boy, that worked. She signed a book contract. The Republicans, I don't know what they paid her, but she switched parties. She's probably getting paid for making speeches, and now she's prepared to move on to higher office. So, God helped her a lot.
You think this was all a ploy?
I do. I believe that from the outset, when she ran for that office, she said, I see an opportunity.
Here's what I see, Harry. I see a troubled lady who had gone through some marriages, tough times, personal issues. She became a devout Christian. She fervently believed in the sanctity of marriage, one man, one woman, and really did think that gay marriage was something that was not biblical, was not something that she could participate in based on her religious beliefs. So I think it was sincere. And I think she had turned her life around. And I think she was following through on her religious convictions. I don't think she was doing it for money or fame.
We don't agree on that.
I personally
but
think she was doing it sincerely.
She could have let her clerk sign those certificates.
Well, I think
she didn't have to sign.
I think that was the agreement when she got out of prison, right?
No, I'll tell you what happened, and I think it's still up in the air. She agreed that she would sign the certificates, but she was going to reword them. She rewrote the certificates in such a manner that the ACLU says we think that this is no longer a valid marriage license and the people using them may not be validly married. I don't know what her wording was, but
so she reworded it in a way where they're not really married, according to the ACLU.
That's what the ACLU,
and that's what she's signing off on.
Well,
I knew she did something whereby she felt like she could participate in it.
Well,
now, here's my question to you. Should that woman, a Christian woman, a woman of faith, been thrown in prison?
She should still be there.
And we've got murderers on the streets, Harry, that aren't in prison. We've got hardened criminals that aren't in prison. And this lady, this Christian lady, is in prison.
If someone will not perform what's required of an office that she ran for and got elected to, and they won't do what that job requires, well, what are you going to do?
We've had conscientious objectors throughout our country's history. What about Muhammad Ali and others who had conscientious objections to the draft?
She really should just resign. Now, as I tell my own people, God gets votes. Have you ever heard a politician end a speech without saying, God bless you and God bless America? We got to go, Jeff. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Harry.
Thank you, folks, for watching our show.